Okay, so me again, and this time I'm going to talk to you a little bit about industry guidelines and legislation. I'm worried that it's a boring topic compared to the previous topics today, but hopefully, because there were some questions about these earlier this morning, I'm hoping that these are areas you're interested in and you'll find something useful in them. So just putting it into context, a little bit of intro from the European Pet Food Industry Federation. They have this information on their website. So 166 million households in the EU own a pet, and that's about half of the households. So that just shows us how many pets we have. And I read that 350 million pets as well. That includes, I think, fish, pet fish as well. Nearly 30 billion euros worth of pet food are sold in the EU, and also 10 million tons of pet food are manufactured in the EU. So just talking about the quantities and the number of animals involved and how important it is to get this right, and in terms of feeding and regulating the industry, extremely important. This slide may look a bit busy, but if we start at the bottom of it, I put these icons as the pet food companies. Imagine these are pet food companies in Europe. Each country will have their own trade association. So, for example, UK Pet Food, or in the case of Finland, is Nordic Pet Food Association that represents 4 Nordic countries. And there's one for Italy, Spain, France, etc. And then all of these are then members of the European Pet Food Federation, FEDIAF, which represent the interest of all of the European pet food industry, including UK, even despite Brexit. And then on top of that sits the authorities and the governments, who are the ones that put the legislations in place and have the enforcement authority, because trade associations are voluntary organizations. They don't have any policing or enforcement power. It's the governments that have that power. So as an industry representation, we lobby with our relevant governments, for example, in our case, UK, in the case of Nordic, their national associations, their own governments, and then for FEDIAF, it's EU Commission that they lobby. And pet food legislation is across Europe, so it's for all European countries that are members of EU. And in the case of UK, although we have exited the EU, but we are still maintaining the same regulations, basically because we want to do export and import with the EU, and it makes sense to comply with virtually identical legislation with the EU. So there are approximately 50 pieces of legislation that govern production and marketing of pet food in EU. I just put a few examples here: animal byproducts, labeling, additives, feed hygiene, etc. And if you just go on EU Commission website and take a look at one of them, for example, the animal byproduct legislation, it's a sheer 254 pages. So each of these legislation are hundreds of pages of information. And they don't necessarily only belong to pet food. For example, animal byproducts have application in other industries as well. It's only a part of animal byproducts that are used in pet food. So to make it more accessible to pet food companies, industry bodies create these guidelines that are an additional resource to the legislation, and for pet food companies to be able to access the requirements from the legislation that is directly relevant to pet food. So the Guide for Safe Manufacture of Pet Food, labeling guidelines, nutritional guidelines for cats and dogs, pet rabbits, and for fish that's in development. These are done by FEDIAF. And as I mentioned earlier today, we have a UK raw pet food guideline as well. On the basis of the raw guideline, again, as I highlighted this morning, we have put together the raw pet food standard. This is a way of raising the standard and also self-regulation, as we call it. So this provides further education for member companies to ensure that they are not only meeting the legislation requirements, but they go above and beyond that to ensure the highest quality And the scope of this standard is from plant design and maintenance to quality management, HACCP, traceability, staff training, supplier assurance, etc., right up to labeling and marketing. So it really covers a wide range of best practice in production of raw pet food. And the information on this are available on our website, starting from the guideline, which includes everything, right up to the poster that I showed you this morning, and that has the basic principles of the certification, which is much more user-friendly, and if you want to talk to customers about it. That's the poster. Talking of self-regulation, another topical issue in pet food is claims. We know that claims are really endless, claims in pet food. There are new claims that keep coming, and pet owners, sometimes when pet professionals don't understand the meaning of these claims. In these two fact sheets that I've put on the screen, you can see one on pet food labeling and one on pet food claims. And although for labeling of pet food, as I mentioned earlier, the rules are clear. We talked about additives earlier. I said that certain additives have to be declared, and the rules around mandatory declarations are very clear from the legislation. And these are your two main points of reference. If you want to understand something about pet food labeling, your references are Regulation 767/2009 and the industry guideline FEDIAF one that comes with it as a way of making it more clear and much more user-friendly. So these are the main two references on mandatory labeling. But when it comes to claims, as I just mentioned, it can be quite confusing and new claims coming up. My favorite new one is pantry fresh, which is hard to really understand what it means, pantry fresh. But these claims are used by companies, and the new ones keep coming, and the list goes on. And it's our responsibility as an industry to help with self-regulation and education in that area. So hopefully part of my goal today is to throw some light on some of those terminologies that we talked about, so at least we understand from a legal perspective what do they mean, and if there are any gaps that we identify, and we want to educate on those as well. So based on FEDIAF labeling guide, these are categories of claims that are permitted. Content claims, negative claims, which refer to the absence of a particular feed material or substance. Comparative claims, when you compare one product with other standard products in that range that is higher or lower in certain ingredients or content. Product descriptors and functional claims. Today we want to talk more about functional claims. And again, these are terms from FEDIAF guideline. So under functional claims, we have nutrient function claims, enhanced function claims, health maintenance, and PARNOTs, which we will get to in more details in a bit. What's not permitted is claims that are applicable to basically all the other products. For example, if you say no GM ingredients are used in my product, that's not permitted, because in the EU generally there is no GM products anyway, so you're almost indicating that other products involve GM. So that's not allowed. Also, medicinal claims are not allowed in pet food. And the use of terms such as treat, cure, and prevent disease, these are not allowed because these are considered medicinal. So functional claims can be made on complete or complementary pet food, so treats as well as complete food. A nutrient substance, characteristic, or additive in the pet food could be the reason for making a claim, and they could have an effect on growth or development or normal function of the body. Again, highlighting that medicinal claims are not permitted. And sometimes these ingredients may have proven physiological benefits, and there may be studies that can prove that claim. Again, just giving some examples of the functional claims that we talked about. So for nutrient function claims, for example, contains glucosamine supporting healthy joints. Or for enhanced function claims, the example given in FEDIAF guideline is contains antioxidants to support the immune system. Or in health maintenance and decreased disease risk, there may be a claim that contains omega-3 fatty acids to help maintain healthy joints. And terms like dose or dosage, cures, treats, remedy, prevent, protect against a disease, relieves, heals, repairs, these are terms that are not permitted because they kind of give the indication of medicines or drugs. This is just basically a screenshot of FEDIAF guidelines. I just put it there to show you if you go to FEDIAF guideline and put in the search box, for example, claims or functional claims or PAR notes, you can see the information there. And it can be quite useful because you can see exactly what companies mean when they use certain terms, or if they make a claim, how they are supposed to substantiate it. In terms of talking about substantiation, it's important that any claim made, the company is able to substantiate them and back them up. So they may be able to give information to customers, as we talked earlier, again about like if a customer called them and asked them for substantiation, they may choose to share or not share. But if they are challenged by the competent authorities, by the government bodies, then they have to be able to substantiate it. That's a legal requirement. Some examples of terms that are not allowed to be used, as I mentioned, dose, dosage, etc., because medicinal, but other alternatives that you can use in pet food are use or administration or application or suits. Terms like that that refer to helping with or supporting with managing a condition, that is allowed, but not curing it, if you know what I mean. It's a fine balance between these two lists. There are these useful checklists, again, screenshots from FEDIAF guidelines so that you know you can refer to them. Annex 4 is mandatory labeling requirements, and Annex 6 are functional claims substantiations that can be useful to see what the requirements are for these. And now talking a little bit about the different groups of pet food as we see on the market. It's quite important to understand these different groups and how they can comply with different legislation. So for maintenance, lifestyle, and life stage, we have products, the standard products like puppy, adult, senior, pregnancy, lactation products. In case of dogs, for example, small, large, giant breed. For cats, you may have indoor or outdoor products, or for neutered cats. And for dogs, we have working dogs or neutered. So these are the standard maintenance products that exist. Then another level of pet food is what they call special care. It's not an official term, but that's what experts refer to. And in special care, sometimes they may use certain ingredients that they can then claim, for example, for coat and skin health, or for digestive care, for joints and mobility. And that's the use of functional claims that we talked about earlier. And PAR notes, which I will talk about in a bit, may or may not apply to this group, depending on what exact claim they are making. Then we have the actual PAR note products, also known as dietetic food or feed, and also known as veterinary diets. So these ones are designed to help manage actual clinical conditions. For example, dermatosis or adverse food reaction, intestinal issues, osteoarthritis, reduction of excessive body weight in case of obesity, and a number of other PAR notes that exist. It's quite important to remember prescription diet is a trademark name for hills, so that's not a term that we can use in this category. We can call them parnuts, dietetic feed, or dietetics, and we can call them veterinary diets, but we can't call them prescription because that's just a trademark name for one company. They've chosen that name for themselves. So the other thing to bear in mind is that vets prescribe medicine, vets prescribe drugs, but they recommend diets. So we can't call parnuts or dietetics pet food prescription for that reason. I also heard the term recipe diet. Again, that's not a term that would mean much because all diets are made from a recipe. No matter which one of these categories of pet food we're talking, there's always a recipe involved in the production of the pet food. So the best way to refer to parnut diets would be dietetic feed or veterinary diets. And these are recommended normally by vets. In the UK, you can buy them from veterinary practices that normally have them, or you can buy them online. But normally you can't just buy them from a pet shop. It has to be either online or from a vet because in principle, they're supposed to be sold under veterinary supervision and based on a vet recommendation. But they don't include any drugs or medicine. They just have nutrition or characteristics that are helping a pet with a clinical condition. And then we have medicated feed, which is a totally different thing outside of the scope of pet food, basically. It's not something we deal with, and it's not very common in companion animals anyway. So they have added authorized veterinary medicine in these products, and the main application is for farm animals. They're mainly antibiotics or pain relief or antiparasites, and hardly used in companion animals anyway. And medicated feed are designed to cure, treat, or prevent disease. So we're not talking about medicated feed, but if you are interested in that area, there's information on that on EU Commission. I put this line just to show that the special care diets and parnuts can sometimes have a fine line between them or a slight overlap. It's not always easy to distinguish these products from each other, but companies should be able to give that information, and vets also have that information because they normally recommend a specific diet for clinical conditions or if it's just a health concern. Because an example I can give is, for example, a pet that feels a bit stiff after sleeping or not moving too much, so they have a bit of stiffness. In that case, they may need a special care diet that a vet recommends, or they may have an actual joint condition like arthritis. In that case, the vet may recommend actual parnut, maybe in conjunction with medicine as well. So vets could prescribe medicine alongside parnut diets. Okay, so I have a few slides on parnuts because I thought this was one of the areas Anna and I talked about and you might be interested. So we know that nutrition has an extremely important role in health, as we talked about today, and in conferences like this, we always talk about that. But nutrition also plays a role in disease. So sometimes, along with medicine, the vet may recommend a diet that is critical to the management of the illness. For example, in renal issues or kidney issues or heart issues, there may be certain minerals or proteins that need to be in the diet that are critical, and no matter how much drugs you give, unless the diet is right, it's not going to help the animal. So the role of parnuts is very important. Parnuts, as I mentioned, they don't have any drugs, but they can help reduce the symptoms or improve the well-being of the animal or even enhance the longevity of the animal. And depending on the health status of the animal, the vet may prescribe medicine in conjunction with recommending a diet. So definition of parnuts, why are they called parnuts? It's because they're called feed intended for particular nutritional purposes. So they turned that particular nutritional to par nuts. In short, par nuts are legally called dietetic pet food. Again, this is a section from FEDIAF guideline. If you're interested to keep that, you can always refer to FEDIAF guideline as well, and that's from the legislation. So they are pet foods that by virtue of their particular composition or method of manufacture, which clearly distinguish them from ordinary feed. And they're intended for particular nutritional purposes that does not include medicated feeding stuff. That's the official definition of par nuts. This is the regulation, screenshot of the regulation 2020-354 that explains the whole of the par nuts for many different species of animals. They were first established in 2008, but over the course of a few years, they were reviewed and scientific dossiers were submitted for each of them to support each of the par nuts. And there are 50 intended uses for both food-producing and pet animals. About 21 of them are specifically for cats and dogs. And this piece of legislation provides a framework for the formulation and labeling of dietetic pet food. So this is one level beyond the ordinary pet food legislation that we talked about earlier. This is very specific. So the most common clinical conditions in cats and dogs for which par nuts exist are heart disease, liver disease, kidney disease, urinary tract disorders, intestinal disorders, skin disease, joint disease, dental disease, weight control / obesity, feline hypothyroidism, diabetes mellitus, and nutritional restoration. So these are the most common conditions that par nuts are used for and recommended for by vets. Here's an example, just a screenshot from the legislation to show you how par nut requirements are laid out. And it's very small, even this close for me. But you will see that it will have an entry number, the particular nutritional purpose, for example, in this case, reduction of iodine levels in feed in case of hyperthyroidism, and it's for cats. This is one of the simplest par nuts because it only has one essential nutritional characteristic. As you can see, it's a restricted level of iodine, less than or equal to 0.26 milligram per kilogram of complete feed with a moisture content of 12%. And some of the other par nuts will have several different essential nutritional characteristics for different species or for different life stages. And then they will have labeling requirements that are very specific to par nuts, and it's beyond the labeling legislation that we talked about. This is another example in the case of support of renal function, in case of chronic renal malfunction. And you will see that this one has 4 different essential nutritional characteristics. One is for dogs, one is for adult dogs, one is for cats, and one is for adult cats. And each of them have different methods of meeting the requirement of this particular par nut. In terms of manufacturing and marketing of par nuts, basically the history of par nuts go back to many, many decades. I think a number of companies, small number of companies started doing this maybe about 60, 70 years ago through clinical trials and proving that certain methods of production or nutrients helped the conditions. And based on those studies, they published scientific dossiers until in 2008, and subsequently in 2020, par nuts were officially published as legislation. But making par nuts is quite strict because they need fixed formulation. It's very important that there is no batch-to-batch variability in the sense that we see in standard pet food. Because as you saw, it says, for example, iodine need to be exactly a certain amount. It's not just a range or just a minimum that you can meet. So batch-to-batch variability is extremely important and needs rigorous testing to ensure consistency amongst the products and batches. And the labeling rules as well need compliance, which are different from other types of pet food. Again, a screenshot from FEDIAF guideline, which explains the rules of labeling for par nuts, which can be useful. In terms of making par nuts, challenges that could be faced by companies if they want to enter the par nut market potentially could be the type of ingredients that they use and also finding ingredients that are consistent in terms of their nutritional content, batch-to-batch variation and strict testing, the exact nutritional characteristic that I highlighted in the previous slide, cost of setting up and scaling up the production, and compliance with all the specific legal requirements. If you want to see the par nut legislation, that QR code you can scan and it takes you straight to the document on EU website. This slide just a few references on regulatory enforcement. In my case, these are the UK regulatory bodies, but in every European country, there will be national authorities that take care of animal byproducts regulations, animal feed regulations, and there will be a body that would take care of medicinal claims. In the case of UK Veterinary Medicine Directorate. So if anybody make medicinal claims on pet food, VMD will find out about it and they can prosecute if needed. So it's a very sensitive area. How am I doing with time? Just a few take-home messages from these previous slides. So all pet food claims must be substantiated. So whether you're a pet food company or a pet professional, you need to know that if a company is making claims, they need to be able to substantiate it. And as a pet professional, I think you can demand your pet food companies to explain to you the reason behind their claims. Even if they can't declare the recipe to you, they can at least tell you enough to satisfy you about or reassuring you about their products. So substantiation of the claims is very important. Ensuring compliance through technical expertise. So if it's a small company, maybe they don't have their own nutritionist, they can still source it from an external nutritionist. So technical expertise are really important in pet food production. And once again, going back to the point on driving change, as we talked earlier, if we feel that we need labeling of pet food to change as vets or as pet professionals or pet owners, then this is a forum where we can discuss it and we can take it forward together. Rather than, because sometimes we see pet food companies single-handedly try to do a campaign to change the legislation. It doesn't happen that way. It has to be through collaboration and work together. And the other point I wanted to mention was collaboration between industry and academia. Because we know that some pet food companies in the UK, some raw pet food companies want to do feeding trials, but they can't find either in-home pet owners or expert dogs or cats to do the trials with. And they want to export to EU to run with a university, but because of Brexit issues, for example, they can't do that because of the trade barriers. So if we could set up like a network or a link between universities and companies or trade bodies, that could be potentially very useful, because then we can pull the resources together and see who can help with what, maybe there is a university in Helsinki that can help with a company that maybe is based in Spain. So if there is a network of all interested parties, this could potentially be useful in driving forward change and research and progress. So I jumped from my final slide to come to the additives because I promised to cover a bit on labeling of additives. So first of all, additives permitted in pet food in the UK are the same as EU. We basically copy-pasted the same legislation. There's a link to the UK version of it, but on the EU website there's also a link to registered feed additives. It's different to human food because each additive needs to be authorized for the species of animal that is intended for. In pet food, you can't use an additive that's authorized for example, cats, in the case of rabbits or other species of animals. So feed additives are strictly regulated by the EU Commission, and it's the European Food Safety Authority that authorizes the safety and efficacy of the additives. This is a link to the EU Register of Feed Additives. So mandatory requirements, this is what we were talking earlier this morning. So there, I don't know if, is Caroline also here? Or maybe she left, because she was asking about calcium in particular. So there are only 4 mandatory reasons for additives to be declared. Where an additive has a legal maximum level for any non-food producing animal, for example, if there is a legal maximum for cats, then it has to be declared for dog food as well. So if there is a legal maximum level permitted, then it has to be declared. When recommended maximum contents are exceeded. So sometimes some additive like vitamins are added to the product in higher levels than permitted because there will be some losses throughout the process. And in that case, because they are adding more than recommended maximum content, they have to declare that. And if the presence of an additive is emphasized on the label, so for example, if you say it has vitamin E, then you have to put the amount of vitamin E on the back of the pack. And finally, additives belonging to certain categories or functional groups, but that's not very relevant because it's not commonly used, these ones, in pet food. So I would say the top 3 reasons for additives to have to be declared are these that I mentioned. And yeah, another highlight that only authorized additives may be used for the species and function, and voluntary declaration of additives are also permitted. Okay, so how to declare the additives? How are additives declared? Under the heading of additives, on the back of the pack, it can be either category or functional group of the additive. For example, nutritional additives or trace elements, or technological additive or thickeners. So it's not single additives that is required by law. It's the category or functional group. Name or ID number, for example, zinc / the ID number, zinc sulfate, and the ID number, and added amount, for example, 110 milligram per kilogram. Declaration for pet food, additives belonging to the functional groups of preservative, antioxidants, colorants, and flavorings can be declared by just the representative functional group only. So they don't need single individual names. And for trace elements, declared added amounts of the active substance, not the compound. So as you can see, I mean, I don't want to turn this session into a how to label additives, but I just wanted to show you that the legal requirements are very, very detailed and specific, and companies must comply, or otherwise they will be challenged by local authorities. some examples of how additives can be declared. And yeah, in the case of rabbit food, it's quite complicated because in some countries they're food producing and in some countries non-food producing. And for trace elements, again, specific details. For vitamins, whose amounts vary during processing and or shelf life can be labeled under analytical constituents or amount guaranteed at the end of shelf life. So again, for vitamins, there are specific requirements because sometimes there are losses throughout processing. And I hope I answered your questions about additives, to some extent at least. And I go back to my final slide, and I wanted to end with a picture of my dog when he was a puppy, and when he later welcomed his own baby brother a few years ago. And yeah, that's my email address if you have any follow-up questions, and the link to our LinkedIn page. Thank you.